What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday, and I know what you're thinking. You're wearing the same sweatshirt that you were wearing either last week or possibly the week before, and the answer is true because I'm doing these back-to-back because I have a couple busy weeks coming up, so I had to double up one day. I'm not a poop-put, sir, and I carry myself quite well in public, but desperate times call for desperate measures. That being said, today we are going to continue on with the Q&A. A lot of people seem to really appreciate it from before, the part one, and we're going to continue on today with part two. First and foremost, I want to reiterate these questions come from Patreon. I opened up the Q&A to Patreon to accumulate the questions to create the Sit Down Saturdays for. So if you're wondering how can I ask a question, the answer is join a Patreon for right now. I might go live at some point for a Sit Down Saturday at some point, but not anytime real soon. So without much further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. And this first question is kind of a doozy. For those that don't know, I hope you do, I have a weekly podcast called Nerd Rage Radio. We don't really talk about Transformers, although when news hits regarding them, we do talk about them, but it has to be kind of significant news, not just like one reveal. But we talk about our lives a lot, stuff like that. It's kind of like, what does it sound like when three guys that are into pop culture at the age of 40 get together and talk when they have families and careers and are also like debating on who could beat who in a fight between the Hulk and Superman. And I started this podcast with a gentleman named Adam, who was my childhood best friend. And he eventually left the show. The first question is in regards to this. It's from Kevin R., who says, honestly, I think I pieced most of the Adam stuff together, but I am curious if you can tell the whole story. So here's the thing. I met that dude when I was in 6th grade. We became friends, stayed friends, had families, etc., etc. He had a couple of ventures that he was doing. I had a couple of ventures that I was doing, namely Skullface and the DMH stuff. I think he wanted to do something with me in that space, so to speak. One day we were on the phone, had a pretty in-depth conversation about Thundercats and He-Man, ironically, and that basically ended up with us doing a podcast called Nerd Rage Radio. And look, here's the thing, like while people, like I'm just gonna be dead honest about this, I would have never left that dude's side. We had grown apart. We had become different people. We met each other when we were 11. We're now, I think, 39 when we parted ways. I would have never left his side, even though we were arguing a lot. And it starts to sound like a dating relationship, but that's just how close we were. I would have never left him. I think he had a lot of stuff, and I don't mean to speak for him, but he carried a lot of stuff with him of trespasses that he felt as I had committed over the years. I tried to apologize and make amends for those trespasses, but I kept making more trespasses. I'm just being honest about this part. Once again, not an attack on him. I wasn't holding a lot of the trespasses that he had done against me against him. I was letting them go. And I would have conversations, namely with my wife, and be like, man, like I feel like I've done this dude dirty. I haven't done a lot of stuff for him, and I've done all these things against him. And she would remind me, like, no, you did this, and you did this, and, you know, we did this. And when they were in this spot, we helped them with that. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then it got me to thinking about how I'm not holding anything against him, and I'm not putting a flag in the ground for the things I did for him. I'm just having it go as a part of life. And I'm not saying that I didn't make those trespasses that he claims. I probably did. In some cases, I know I did. You know, and I tried to apologize for them and explain them. He has an incredible memory, and he's able to recall things very clearly and sharply. I tend to not. I tend to let things go and generalize things in my mind. And that's only come with age with me. In my younger days, I used to hold things against, like I used to be that guy. But I stopped being that guy, for better or worse. So a lot of times when we get into these little arguments, that's why I would feel bad, because he would recall these things from his memory. So I started keeping some notes of things. Trespasses that he was making. Things that I had done in defense or whatever. And we got into a pretty significant argument on Nerd Rage, and I brought my notepad up. And that argument went different than a lot of the other ones had gone. And I don't know if that was the catalyst, but that was the last time that he did Nerd Rage. He finished that show, and then he backed out. I was really okay with that. I tried to continue to invite him into things that he's always been into in my life. And for whatever reason, he continued to not be able to make those things. Things that we were always kind of involved with in his life, he chose to do in a different way. And I don't mean just him and I, but, you know, our families, who were all relatively close. And at a certain point, I had to just let it go because it was becoming really psychologically damaging for me. So in order to save my psyche, I had to kind of remove him from my life, remove him from my invite list, you know, I had to, because the idea of hanging on was too painful for me. And I'm sure he's got his own point of view on it. I'm not trying to say that he was a monster and I'm the angel, certainly not. I'm sure he can paint it in a very different life, but that's my perspective on it. I think that doing Nerd Rage together was probably a mistake. It led to some great stuff, but I think that ultimately we had grown too far apart to be spending that much time together every week. Prior to Nerd Rage, we'd see each other maybe once a month. Families would hang out, eat dinner, good times, etc., etc. You go from that to doing it every week for 3 to 4 hours. You don't always get to the nitty-gritty conversations and the month talks. You definitely get them when you're seeing each other 3 to 4 hours a week. And you start to realize, like, maybe we shouldn't be spending this much time together. And maybe we're not as close as we thought we were. Or we're only close to the idea of being close, or whatever. Like, I've kicked this around 1,000 different ways in my head. I don't have the clear answer. I don't hate the dude by any stretch of the imagination. Still love him. I wish him the best. And who knows? We've split apart before. We could very well come back together again. Just not today. There's also an episode of Wine and Cheese, Kevin, on Patreon that digs into this heavily. There's actually multiple ones that dig into this heavily, but if you hit me up and remind me, I will get you that information. Heavy start. Sorry if you guys don't care about Nerd Rage. This is a very Nerd Rage focused question. This next one is from Astromotive_97. Do you have a figure, statue, piece of media, or any other collectible in your collection that you would consider to be your guilty pleasure? I.e., something that the majority of people say is bad, but you can still find some enjoyment in it regardless. 1,000,000%. Let me tell you guys something. There is a piece of media from the 80s that I love dearly, and nobody loves it except for Joe, aka Uncle Dolphin. He's my only friend that loves it, and that is Flight of Dragons. It's a cartoon movie. It was like the boys' movie of The Last Unicorn. Like, The Last Unicorn was kind of marketed to the girls, and Flight of Dragons was kind of marketed to the boys. Same type of animation and everything. James Earl Jones is a voice actor. Like, I love it. Still to this day, I think it's amazing. I think the characters are cool. I think the names of the characters, Briog, and, you know, I just think it's a cool world. I'm gonna add on to this. You didn't ask me, but that's okay. I'm gonna add on to it. I wish that Mythic Legions, who kind of do soft homages to fantasy lines, would do a soft homage line for Flight of Dragons. I would buy every single one of them. I'm the biggest Flight of Dragons fan that I know, and that's far from a flex. More like an embarrassing, shameful recognition. Let me tell you what I have. I have the DVD, which isn't easy to get. I have the book that the cartoon is somewhat based on, which is even more difficult to get. I actually hired, like in my 20s, far before all this stuff, I hired like a book detective to hunt it down and get it for me. It was expensive. And I own a painting, or a poster, a print, on my wall of the illustrator who did the illustrations in the book, who the designs from the cartoon were kind of based off of. I have one of their illustrations framed on my wall on the way into my basement. I'm the biggest Flight of Dragons fan I know, and it is 100% a guilty pleasure. Not necessarily because I think it's bad, but because everybody else constantly tells me it's bad. The next one is from proud Patreon supporter Bishop Russ. He's a good dude, looks out for me all the time. Why do you think a lot of Transformer fans dislike Murder Prime in the Bay films when we clearly see him kill Decepticons in the War for Cybertron, Fall of Cybertron video games, and see him pushed to the breaking point in executing Megatron in the 86 film? So I kind of addressed this in the last one. I don't think he was ever really going to ever execute Megatron. I don't think that's who he was. I can't speak for everybody, right? I think that maybe had it been just the Murder Prime thing that was wrong with his sort of representation in the Bay films, that would have been fine. Or maybe not just his representation, kind of all the characters' representations, that would have been fine. I think it's the fact that they got so much of it wrong, and then that element was added into it. There's little things like he literally, I think it's in the third one, stabs a character in the back. Like, I'm okay with Prime being a soldier, and as a result of the war, deaths happen. It's like the stabbing in the back, the over-the-top murder stuff that was kind of a turn-off for me. But even still, it wasn't the killing, it was the style and the method in which it was done. That stabbing in the back one, that's a hard one to get over. I'm okay, even in the 86 movie, I don't know what, actually those characters survived, but like, let's say that they didn't, right? When he was driving, you got the touch, he transforms into the truck, he's driving up to Megatron, he hits a couple Ramjet, Blitzwing flies out of the way, right? I'm okay, even if when he had hit Ramjet, if he had killed him, right? Because you're in the midst of battle. Now, had he just taken his gun and blown Megatron's head clean off at that point where Megatron is like groveling, that to me wouldn't sit right with who Prime is. And he didn't do that. And I don't think he ever would have done that. I think he would have only when Megatron grabbed the gun in self-defense. Hope that helps. Next one's from Joel W. He says, pretty much the one thing I have on my mind to ask was if things with your family, 3 kids, was planned out or just sort of happened. I know that your girls have something of a more widespread age gap, So I was just curious as if having 3 was something of a plan from early on or a decision that came later. So a number wasn't planned, but they were all planned. Well, my oldest, Jaina, wasn't planned, but we were up for it. She was a one-shot, one-kill situation. She really wanted to exist bad. The other 2 was like more like planned out, and I think Selena actually took a few months, and Leia, my youngest, was I think 2 months. Took 2 months to get it done. So yeah, they were all planned. And I think honestly, it was never about having 3. It was we had 1, and then we started chasing a boy. And I never had a boy. I got 3 girls. That's just what's in the cards for me. I think it's what I need. Like I think that I'm not a super religious person, but I do believe in some destinies and stuff like that, and like I think in a way you get what you're supposed to get and you don't get upset. But I don't know if a guy like me is meant to be fighting over the last piece of chicken with some teenage boy. I don't know if that's meant for me. I also have a very sketchy history with women that started with my mom, and maybe that's a life lesson to like learn to love women. It's like, Like I can get into it. I can get deep into it. But that's what we were doing. We were chasing a boy, and after the 3rd one, we knew we couldn't handle any more kids. Like we were just at our wits' end. And let me also say this: like having a boy, for me, the biggest regret of not having a boy, it has nothing to do with like my legacy. You shall one day pick up the skull crown. It was never about that. It was more so about like my wife is never gonna dance with a son at a wedding. That's just something that she's never going to have the opportunity to do. Whereas I'm gonna dance, with 3 girls at their weddings if they get married, By that point, the whole world will probably say that marriage is a social construct and we shouldn't do it anymore. But if they do decide to do it, I would, I get to have that experience. Whereas, like, that's something my wife would never. It was that type of stuff that really made me chase the boy, so to speak. Next one is from Esteban. Bobby, you've mentioned that you tease and joke with your daughter so they're ready for the day they meet you in school or life. Have you talked to Laura about being prepared for when they meet the other you, the one that secured your wife? So, like, and I'm paraphrasing there a bit, but, like, for them, like, my daughter's, like, meeting boys and stuff, like, I think a lot of it is going to come down to what's going on in their life outside of boys. Like, if they're making good decisions across the board, right? Like, they're doing good in school, they're being responsible, they're trying to get a job, they're taking care of their stuff, they're respecting their things, they're respecting the house, they're respecting us, they're just doing all the things you're supposed to do. I'm going to consider their choices in boys to be along the same lines. That the characteristics that have been developed within them, hopefully, God willing, have developed them into young ladies that are capable of making the right choices for themselves. Now, if everything in their life is a mess, I'm going to expect that the boys that they find are also going to be a mess. And there'll be different rules and regulations in regard to how they deal with them. Because their life is going to be a lot more constrictive anyways, just due to their choices. My kids and I, like, if you guys listen to Nerd Rage, like, we have, especially my older one, and as they get older, like, we talk about hard topics, so to speak. We talk about sex, we talk about drugs, we talk about violence, we talk about tough topics openly. Not all the time, not like pass the butter, hey, what do you think of this? But, we create those moments. So I plan on educating them about the way that boys move, and if you're a boy or you were like me, then you're willing to do a lot to accomplish the mission. And I'm going to make her aware of those things, but I also have to trust my kids, right? Like, as long as they're showing me that they're kind of developing the behavior patterns, characteristics that suggest that I should trust them to kind of make the right decisions. Honestly, I just want them to be safe. I want them to be responsible, and I want them to do what they want to do. I don't want them to do anything they don't want to do or feel pressure to do anything or any of that stuff. That's what I would like for them to avoid. Otherwise, I'm kind of good with it. All right, Chris Mall, my guy. I might be with you right now as this video comes out, Chris. He says, hey, Bobby, how do you deal with the overwhelming feelings of loss and grief from the death of loved ones? He's had a lot of loss recently, RIP to Jesse, Frank, and James. I'm not sure that I do. I'm not sure that I do deal with it. Like, I think I carry a lot of that with me. I've lost a lot of people in my life. I feel like at my age, like a disproportionate amount of people than one should. And I'm not sure that I deal with it well at all. I can tell you that, like, I did go to therapy for like 6 weeks back in like 2008, and just in telling some of my stories and stuff, like, the therapist was able to like give me some, like, not tools, not like ways to deal with it, but she was able to give me some ideas and understanding it. Because that's what messes me up sometimes, is when I lose somebody, like, I grieve pretty hard. And it doesn't even need, to be honest, it doesn't even need a death. It doesn't even need to be death. I mean, to circle it back to Adam, like, when I lost that dude out of my life, I grieved hard. I wasn't right. I'm still not right. But in terms of like death, you know, I just try to remember, you know, I try like to tell stories about them to other people. And, you know, if you listen to Nerd Rage, you've heard them, you know. Anytime there's a gathering at my house, like we have a party or whatever, like when we always have a cheers at one moment for, and like name off the people, you know, that we lost. And then, you know, even at the house, we even my kids with their orange juice or whatever, like we toast and then we go up for the ones we love and down for the ones we lost, and then we drink. You know, I think it's my way of dealing with it is to never forget them, like to celebrate them, to talk about them, to share stories about them. But I miss them all, especially now being in this space. Like I had some real characters in my life, man, that would have loved to kind of get down and talk a bunch of here, you know, and kind of stir the hornet's nest up with the fans and stuff. And I mean, like the Transformer fans, you know. I miss the guys, you know, and I've lost a lot of guys, and then my grandmother, and I don't deal with it well at all. I don't think I'm the right person to ask, unfortunately. My pain about it never goes away. It just gets a little number, if that makes sense. And then the last one, so it looks like two just part 1 and 2, unless Patreon wants to do it again. Patreon, if you guys want to open it up again for another round, let me know, and I'll open up something in the Patreon for you guys to throw it in there. But this is from Rusty. He says, if you could do it all over again, would you change anything? Yeah, I would. I would definitely change a ton, but I would definitely do it all over again. I've met some really great people, and to be honest with you, there's other things like, you know, doing the podcast with my wife on Patreon has like kind of brought us together. It's kind of fixed some stuff in our marriage that we didn't even know we needed to fix. Like there's been so many benefits from doing this that has absolutely nothing to do with the plastic on my shelves. It has to do with the people that are now some of my closest friends, the relationships that have developed from podcasting, the relationships that have evolved from podcasting. If I could change anything, I probably would have never started Nerd Rage with Adam. I think it was hindsight's 2020, right? But I think it played a part, not that it's its fault, but just the logistics of it played a part in the destruction of our friendship. But and in the same breath, I love doing Nerd Rage. It's probably one of my favorite, like it's the top 3 things that I enjoy doing out of all of this stuff. The music show with my wife, the Zoom meetings I really like a lot on Patreon, and then Nerd Rage. That's probably the 3 things that I enjoy, and dummies. So that's like the 4 things that I enjoy doing the most. So I would definitely do it again. I don't know, like you learn, right? You learn, but from the mistakes and stuff like that. But I think that like there's things that you learn about the business side of some of this stuff later on, creative control of stuff that you learn later on that I wish I would have taken account of. To be fair and honest, man, I'm not sure if the skull mask was the right move. It was a move out of necessity, but I think it's something that keeps my channel down rather than elevates it. You know, like it is what it is now, and I can't change that. But if I had the opportunity, you know, if I lived a different life and I could have it, then I probably would have. You know, I would have wanted more ownership of Shattercast, like proper ownership. I probably would have never gotten involved in like YouTube comments discussions and block the emails from it so that I could just never had to like be, you know, but you can't, like when you start off, you're like eager to know what everybody thinks of what you're doing, and it's like it's all part of the ride. You know, so like of course there's stuff that I would like to say I would change, but I'm not sure if I would be whatever I am now had it not happened, you know. So it's one of those things, as corny as that sounds. And Rusty, of course, can be found on the social medias for Transformers Masterpiece Theater, and all those links will be in the description. So yeah, hope that helps get you guys through. There is one question on here that was asked that has to do with the breakup of Shattercast into All Hail Unicron, if you know about any of that. And like, that's just not, like, I don't know enough about it, for one, and for two, that's just not my story to tell. I could talk about me leaving Shattercast at nauseum, and I think that's going to happen on Patreon. I think that Lenny and Robert and I are going to have a discussion about it. But the other one's not my story to tell. All right? Hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.